Hello, dear students. This is our lecture on Karl Marx, the second part of the lecture, and I am Dr. Maha Sallam. In the first part, we mentioned that Marxism, the theory of Karl Marx, is sometimes called dialectical materialism, and today we are going to see the application of this theory to human history. According to the dialectical rule that was applied by Hegel and then by Marx to human history, there is a sequence of 4 stages: thesis, antithesis, conflict, and synthesis. This sequence that we mentioned before is like a cycle which is repeated throughout the course of human history. So let us see the application of Marx. He was applying this sequence to the course of human history since the beginning of human communities. For example, the first step, the thesis, is like there were rulers for any human community since the beginning of time. The rulers may be kings or emperors or chieftains or whatever title they have, and these rulers had absolute power. The antithesis to this thesis is the existence of the slaves or the dispossessed or the oppressed people who make the opposite end of society. Of course, there is a sort of conflict between the two classes mentioned above, and this conflict is the result of the clash of interests between them. Whatever will benefit the rulers does not necessarily benefit the dispossessed, and vice versa. And then we come to the fourth step, synthesis, when the two decide to cooperate together, forming a civil society and to put down the rules of the society, and this was known as the feudal society. Now, again, this feudal society, after some time, this synthesis that we are speaking of is going to break down with the passage of time due to class conflict, and this will lead to further separation of classes, and it will lead to the initiation of a new cycle. We will have the class of the wealthy and powerful landowners or feudal lords on the top, and this will be the new thesis of the new cycle, the class of feudal lords, depending on owning the land. And the antithesis will be the class of peasants or agricultural workers, sometimes known as serfs or slaves, or in other words, the working class. So this is the new antithesis. The two classes, after having some conflict, they will reach a stage of cooperation together, a new synthesis, and then they will form a new type of society known as the industrial capitalist society. This new synthesis, the industrial capitalist society, is going to break down due to class conflict and into, again, the employers or the capital on one hand, this is a further thesis, and the employees or the labor on the other hand, which is the further antithesis. According to Marx, right now, we are living at this new class conflict stage between capital on one hand and labor on the other. Marx believed that this conflict is going to be resolved by the synthesis stage, and this synthesis stage will be reached only if we follow the rules of socialism and later communism. When we have a socialist society and later a communist society where all economic resources and all wealth is equally shared among the members of this society, it will be a sort of utopia. And according to Marx, this utopia is bound to be achieved in the future because he believed in a deterministic outlook. The worldview of Marx or Marxism is deterministic, which means that once we have a certain form of circumstances, this will inevitably lead to the occurrence of certain results. And because this theory also is not only deterministic but also dialectical, so it believes that there is always the sequence that we mentioned. The four stages that we mentioned are going to happen inevitably, and because it is materialistic, Marxism believes that economic relations of production are the most important factor in the equation of the progress of human history. So let us remember the three words about determinism, dialecticism, materialism, which are the three main features of Marxist theory when applied to the development of human history. Now, one final point before we come to the end of our lecture. Marxism divides society into a suprastructure and an infrastructure. According to Marx, the suprastructure is the ideologies that dominate a particular era, or in other words, ideologies that everything men can say or imagine or conceive. For example, politics, the law, morality, religion, metaphysics, culture, education, art, literature, sports, all these are part of the suprastructure of any society. On the other hand, the infrastructure is the economic base of society. It is labor. It is the powers of production, the relations of production. Example, when we have trained workers and raw material and tools and machines, etc. So there is always the suprastructure and the infrastructure in any society. And according to Marx, these two structures have a mutual influence. They influence each other. The suprastructure exerts influence on the infrastructure, and also the opposite is true. The infrastructure exerts some influence on the suprastructure, and even under certain conditions, the infrastructure can succeed in acquiring domination or hegemony. It doesn't always need to be that control is in the hands of the suprastructure. The infrastructure can sometimes attain control and attain power or hegemony or domination. So now we have come to the end of Marxism. We have come to the end of the two lectures that explained in brief the theory of one of the top modern philosophers of the Western world, Karl Marx, whose dates are 1818, 1883, and whose philosophy is not just a system of thought in the books and the classrooms, but it had concrete and very important and significant effects on human history during the 20th century. Thank you and good luck.